we continue our series today, Win at Home. If you missed last week, we talked about kind of like paving the ground or setting the foundation of this is what building a winning home is supposed to look like. And if by chance you missed that, you go to our website, you can catch up either audio or video because it really kind of sets everything up for what we're going to talk about over these next 4 weeks. Now, the thing about it is last week we didn't really solve anything. We just, in laying the foundation, maybe caused more questions than we gave answers, and hopefully over these next 4 weeks, we'll be able to kind of use what we talked about last week as our compass and our guide to hopefully get things dialed in and figure out, depending on what your family situation is and it actually looks like. Now, over these next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about winning marriages. Because the thing about a winning family is if you're going to have a winning family, you have got to have a winning marriage. Your kids can be all kinds of knuckleheads, but if you and your spouse, if husband and wife can figure things out and set the tone and do things right, then all the other stuff can kind of fall into place and eventually look the way it's supposed to look. Now, as we begin our marriage conversation, I'm going to start with a question, and you're going to think, that's the weirdest question I've ever heard or been asked in my life. But what I need to do is kind of establish kind of a common ground, because everybody's coming at this from a different angle, different perspective. Everybody has a different story and different background and history. So I need everybody to come from where they start from to a common place so that we can move forward and have the conversation together. Now, here's the question I'm going to ask you. What do you do when you realize your spouse isn't perfect? Now, you're sitting there going, hey, listen, I never thought they were perfect. And if you want some evidence as to how imperfect they are, I got a whole list of things, and I could take up the entire service, and I could just go run through. In fact, I got a list started. It's in the car. I'll go grab it, and I'll bring it in, and we'll share it together, whatever it is. Like, you don't think your spouse is perfect, but there was a time where their imperfections didn't really bother you as much. Let me ask this question a different way. What do you do when your spouse begins to disappoint you? What do you do when their imperfections, their failures cause a lot more fights than they did when you were dating? What do you do when the honeymoon stage of your relationship is over? What do you do when the life that they promised you and the life that you are experiencing are light years apart? What do you do when you go back to the college version of you or the high school version of you, and you had these hopes and these dreams and these aspirations, and you thought you knew what your life was going to look like, but the ideal, which is somewhere out there in cyberspace, the ideal and the real, they occupy completely different zip codes. What do you do when you realize your spouse isn't perfect? See, here's how relationships go. I've got some props for you. These were spared no expense, by the way. Okay? This is not a cross, it's an X. Think of like a game show when you get something wrong, and you get the like this is bad. This is a heart, therefore it's good. And here's the way that relationships play out. When you start dating, when you get engaged, when you first get married, there are all types of feelings and emotions and warm fuzzies and passion and all kinds of stuff. And all of that outweighs the bad. In fact, your maybe family members, maybe friends try to like pull you aside and say, are you sure you two are right for each other? And they may say to the guy, she seems really high maintenance and really needy, and I don't know if that's for you. And you just go, yeah, but, oh, she's so pretty, and she smells so good. And, it's like, oh, okay, that's good criteria for who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Maybe there's more there. But then maybe, somebody will go to the girlfriend, the fiance, and they'll say, hey, he seems to have anger issues, or I don't know if he's going to be good with money, or he can't keep a job, and they're trying to like coach, and it's like, yeah, but he just makes me feel so loved, and he makes me feel so pretty, and it's like the feelings, the emotions, they kind of take over, and because they make you feel so good, you kind of ignore this, and the scales tip in the favor of the love and the emotion. But over time, and you're like, yeah, get to the real part, because it starts this way, but over time, and it can happen gradually, over time, the issues, the tensions, the arguments, you get busy, you stop pouring into each other, you stop dating each other, before you know it, you're here. And the problems are what identify your relationship, and the tension is what you recognize more than anything else. And you're like, one day, it's like the frog that gets put in the pot that's slowly brought to a boil. You look around and you're like, how did we get here? I don't think we're happy. But how do we get back to where we were when we dated? And you don't have the knowledge to get back, and you don't have the emotional energy if you knew how to get back. But you find yourself here and you're like, what are we supposed to do now? Sometimes it's not a gradual transition. Sometimes a big life stage issue comes into play. Maybe it's a tragedy of some type. Maybe there's financial stress that causes that to jerk, or the death of a loved one, or the loss of a job. There are big things that can happen in your life that can cause it to happen. There are also like neutral or maybe even good things. Hey, we took a new job and we moved, but that move wasn't a good move. Or our kids, graduate college, they're out of the house, and we look around and we're like, oh, we don't even know what to do with each other anymore. Like, who are you? No, you're not the person I married. And we see that, like, you don't make me happy anymore. You're not the person I married. You used to be my best friend, and we used to do all these things together. What happened to us? So what do you do when your relationship goes from this, and the weight of the relationship dips in the favor of love and warm fuzzies and feelings and all that stuff the Hallmark movies talk about? What do you do when it goes from here to here? And here's your answer, and you're probably not going to like it, because you're going to be like, that's not a solution at all. That's not helpful at all. But here's your answer. You love them. What do you do when you're here? You love them. You live up to your vows. Because when you said I do, before you said I do, they talked about for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, through the good times and the bad. What are you going to do? I'm going to love, honor, and cherish my spouse. We are together through thick and thin. We are a team. We are an unbreakable bond, and you promise to just love unconditionally. It isn't, I'll love you if. And it isn't, I'll love you, but it's just I love you. And that's it. There are no conditions, no clauses, no attachments. It's just I love you. And we're going to talk about what the I love you actually means. Because as much as some of y'all like the Hallmark Channel, it gets it wrong a lot and creates this unrealistic picture of what relationships are supposed to look like. Biblical agape type of love, it has its messy moments. It could be filled with conflict and tension, but agape love is I am just going to keep loving my spouse. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 8. If you've got a Bible or your Bible app on your phone, go ahead and pull it up so you can make notes and underlines. And this is a passage that you can be in church your whole life, or like, I don't know about this church thing, but you've probably heard this passage before. The Apostle Paul describes to us this is what love is supposed to look like. And what it's going to talk about is this is what unconditional love is supposed to look like. And he's not saying this is what love looks like within the context of marriage. He's saying this is what love looks like in general. But if this is how the love is supposed to apply to just anybody that you meet, if this is how you're supposed to, treat people in your church and in your community and at your job and in your neighborhood, how much more should you treat your spouse? So we're going to look at 1 Corinthians 13:4 and following and apply it specifically to the context of marriage. But before we get there, let me just offer a few caveats, because I'm going to read through this passage, we're going to read it together, and I'm going to give you some examples, and you're going to be like, but he doesn't know my situation. Well, let me just offer you a few caveats before we get into this. Caveat number one, we're talking about unconditional love. That does not mean that you turn a blind eye to abusive situations where there's physical, verbal, or emotional abuse. The most loving thing you can do in that situation for the protection of yourself and your kids is to get out of that. So I'm not saying, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but if he puts hands on you, or if she's really violent and she got a knife out once, and man, I've heard all kinds of stories, and you're like, where are you getting your stories from? But listen, I've heard it all, and I've done counseling, and I met with people, and sometimes I hear these stories, and it just makes me call my wife right after the counseling appointment, like, thank you, I love you, I'm so grateful for you, because it's bad in some situations. So this is not a I'm going to give them a blank check to treat me however they want, even if that jeopardizes my safety. No. Number two, there is a clause. When Jesus is teaching on marriage and he's asked about divorce, he's like, divorce was not in the plan. Divorce is not the way it's supposed to be. But then he does say, but, like when the two become one, you can't just casually unone. But if the two become one, and one of those parties, they unone themselves with their spouse, and one with someone else, Jesus is like, that act of betrayal is the biggest act of betrayal in all the human covenants. You betray your country, that's treason, like that's the death penalty. Well, you betray a marriage, it's even worse because of the bond and the oneness that is so mysterious and profound. So Jesus is like, you can't just be one and then start wanting yourself with other people and expect this person to not be hurt to the point of needing to be healed and to potentially be given the right to walk away. Now, there may be reconciliation and you may figure it out and God can be honored through all of that. But I'm not saying that you become a doormat and just allow them to do whatever they want with whomever they want. And you just got to kind of let them keep coming back whenever they want to. And then finally, number three. I am assuming, as we walk through this conversation, that you are willing to sit down with your spouse and have an adult conversations about the different tensions and the issues that lead to this. You can't talk about it. And if you can't lay things out without yelling at each other, without throwing things at one another, we've got really big problems on our hands, and it's more than just we need to apply 1 Corinthians 13. It's we need to go get professional help. And I'm not saying like, hey, there's something wrong with you. Like that just happens at times. And if that's where you're at, then have the courage to say, we need help, and then go get help together. Because you need to be able to sit down and say, as petty and as juvenile as the fights are, there are issues that lead to it, and here's what's going on in my heart. Here's how I think we need to deal with it. What's my part in all of this? And I want to be supportive, and you can have an adult conversation and lay out, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through, what are you feeling? And you guys can kind of find out what makes the other one tick and what is causing the tension in the marriage. You have to be able to talk that out. And I'm assuming that you have. Now, once you have, that's when the real fun begins. Because you're an imperfect human being. You're sinful and selfish, and so is your spouse. And those two sinful, selfish people now come together, and marriage can be one of the best and most blissful of all human relationships, but it can absolutely be one of the worst. Some of you have seen that. Some of you have experienced that. What do you do when you realize your spouse isn't perfect? You love them. And here's how you love them. Here's how Paul begins. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. Okay, now listen. You want to take a nap? 45 seconds from now, you can. If you only get one thing, you're like, the preacher just said we could take a nap in church. I love this church. This is great. Not really, but just if you're only going to listen to one thing I say, it's this. Patience, kindness. 98.73% of your arguments and the tension in your marriage would go away if you were just patient and kind. Now, it is true that 37% of statistics are made up on the spot, and they don't really actually, so, like, that's not a real number, okay? I just threw it out there. It's hypothetical. But, my goodness, if you were just patient with your spouse and kind to your spouse, and as Paul walks through this, he's going to tell us, this is how you should think about your spouse. This is how you should treat your spouse. This is how you should talk about your spouse. Like, this encompasses what it's supposed to look like in a marriage. And if you were just patient and kind, most of your issues just go away overnight. So be patient and kind. I don't have to give a lot of examples about what patience and kindness looks like. You've seen Sesame Street, haven't you? You've watched Mr. Rogers. That's been poured into your head since you were little. And yet, we do a terrible job of being patient and kind in so many areas, especially within the context of marriage. So be patient and kind. Love also does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. Now, this plays out in all different ways in all types of relationships within the context of marriage. Think about how this plays out when you start talking about being envious or being jealous of the success that your spouse has, or boasting and being proud in the things that you're able to do and accomplish that your spouse isn't. And it may even be the things that are causing some of the tension and some of the arguments to continue and that shift that's slowly taking place. And it's petty things. It's always petty things. And the petty things speak to a bigger condition of the heart, but it's things like, honey, I said we were supposed to leave by 6:30. You promised you'd be ready to leave by 6:30. It's 6:43 and I'm sitting in the car. What in the world? How long could it take? How could it take you so long? And then it's like, I'm always ready on time. Why can't you get ready? Well, that's boasting and proud. Now, the other spouse, and here, by the way, this is always interesting to me. Time is always a big issue in a marriage. And what happens oftentimes is that you see two spouses come together that have a different concept of time and tardiness. So one spouse says, if we aren't 15 minutes early, we are late. And one spouse says, no, fashionably late, that's in. So as long as we're within like an hour of the start of the event, we're good to go. And then those two parties come together and it's this all the time. Why can't you be ready on time? Well, I have to get myself ready, which takes longer, and I have to get the kids ready, and you're sitting there watching the game, and yeah, you're ready, but your hair's like 1/50th the length of mine, and you don't condition, and I don't know what all you ladies do, but there's just a lot of stuff that goes on with the hair. And then the kids, and they pack the bag, and to my failure, I never once packed a diaper bag. Never in my life. You're like, oh, that's terrible. But it's true. I'm just being honest, okay? Being vulnerable up here. If my wife needed to send me somewhere with the kids, she packed the bag for me. And so if like, hey, we're late. Well, will you pack the diaper bag? I'm like, I don't know what goes in the diaper bag. And don't say diapers, by the way, because it's so much more than diapers. I don't know where all the stuff is to even put it in the bag. You want me to place random objects in the bag to get us through whatever it is? And so there's this tension. It's like, I'm always like, why can't you be more like me? Well, that is boasting and proud. You never pay the bills on time. You have one bill that you're responsible. I pay all the bills. Why can't you be more like me? Why are you so irresponsible with money? Look, we've got a final notice on this. Do you not pay? Is it that hard to get a check? Hey, watch, I'll show you how to do it. I'll get the checkbook out. I'll write the check. I'll fill it out. I'll put it in. I'll lick the stamp. I'll put it on. Not anymore because of COVID, but it's got the sticky on the back. I'll put it on the back, and we'll put tape on that. Look, now it's in the mailbox. Was that so hard? And some of you are like, are you listening to our fight? You have our house bugged? Like, what in the world? But that's what it looks like. And we're not patient. We're not kind. We envy. We do boast. And we're proud. And it does this to our relationship. Paul goes on. And he says, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. And love keeps no record of wrongs. Dishonoring others, both in private and in public. Because there's so many times where there are passive-aggressive comments made, and sometimes just plain aggressive comments made about your spouse to their friends or to their family. And sometimes we also keep really good record of wrongs. We have selective amnesia when we drop the ball, when we make mistakes. I was like, I don't remember that. But your stuff, I've got saved on my phone for such an occasion as this argument. And you start going through, and it's like, wait a minute. Why are you bringing up what happened in college? We graduated 30 years ago. That's not relevant anymore, is it? But it is when there's this going on in a marriage. And so not only do we throw their failures in their face, but even when they do it right, we have to throw failures in their face. So you say you're going to leave at 6:45. They come getting in the car at 6:44. See, I told you I could do it. Here we are. Okay, well, hey, once in 10 years, it's about time you get it right. Like, we throw their failures in their face even when they do a good job. And as I say that, you listen, and here's the thing. When you see another couple fighting in this way, it makes you uncomfortable, and you see the pettiness, and you see how juvenile it is, and you're like, oh my goodness, this looks bad. Why are they being that way to each other? But then you do the exact same things to your spouse, don't you? It's different when you're saying it. It's always different when you see someone discipline their kids and you're like, ooh, that seemed a little harsh. That was a little over the top. And you never notice it when you're the one getting on to them for whatever it is. And people are looking at you thinking the same thing. So I give these examples, and you're like, that's not us. That's not me. I don't do that. Really think about like your last 37 arguments or however many can come to you right off the top of your head. And go, oh, yeah. A lot of times I dishonor my spouse. And a lot of times I'm easily angered, and I do keep record of wrongs because they throw stuff in my face, and I've got to have ammo to throw back at them. So here we go. We just go back and forth. That's a great marriage to be in each and every day. When you guys are fighting with one another about who's worse, and both thinking that you're never the problem, that you're never the issue. Love is not self-seeking. I mean, you think about how what we defend and what we spend money on and how we manage time and how we like to protect ourselves and our desires and our hobbies. And so, I'll go spend way too much money on hunting, on golf, and then my wife wants curtains, and I'm like, we don't need, what's wrong with our current curtains? There's nothing wrong with those. And she's like, well, what's wrong with your current 3-wood? It's like, well, it's 3 years ago's model. They've gotten a lot better. And then it's like, I want it. No. I want to spend the money on my stuff. And she's like, no, I want to spend the. And that's how we do it. We are self-seeking, and we protect our own stuff. And Paul's like, that's not the way love is supposed to look. And within marriage, and the real practical things you can do, you can just get a budget together, and you can say, okay, you got X amount of dollars to spend on decorating, you got X amount of dollars to spend on golf, and did you buy a new club? Yeah, but it fits in the budget. Oh, okay, cool. What are those new curtains? Yeah, I took it right out of the budget. We agreed on it. Oh, awesome. I would have gone with Chevron, but no, yeah, that looks good too, honey. I just learned what Chevron was, by the way, not too long ago. Yeah, Fixer Upper is a staple at our house. Thank you, HGTV. Easily angered. Love is not easily angered. We can be really easily angered. In fact, a lot of times, and I notice this as a dynamic, in the home, sometimes husband, wife, and or kids, they're waiting to see what version of mom or what version of dad are going to pull into the driveway. So they see the headlights or they hear the garage door come up. Everybody kind of freezes, and nobody talks about it. It's like the elephant in the room. Nobody talks about it, but everybody's kind of waiting. Are they going to be in a good mood today, or are they going to be in a bad mood? And you can usually tell by the way the door opens and the bag or the coat and the shoes come off. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to do my homework. If anybody needs me, I'll be in my room, because you just know to get out of the way. And your spouse is sitting there going, oh, no, they're in a bad mood. And we got home late, and I didn't start supper like I was going to. And I don't know if I have the energy for World War III to happen at our house. And you could just know it's coming. And love says, no, I'm not going to lose my mind because someone cut me off, or my boss was a jerk to me, and well, you didn't have supper ready, or the kids, they don't have their bath yet, oh, their homework's not done, oh my God, what have you guys been doing you can't do it, because that's not what love does. It's natural for us to do that, but we're not wanting to act naturally towards our spouse. We're wanting this supernatural Holy Spirit type of agape love to come out of us. Verses 6 and following. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Love does not delight in evil. In the context of marriage, I would say love does not delight when your spouse fails, when they drop the ball, when they make a mistake, so that then you can have ammunition to throw back in their face. Because sometimes, deep down, you like the drama. It's already there. You like it when they mess up, because now I'm going to save that for later, because there's going to come a point where it can come out. And you celebrate their failures because it justifies your stance in the problems in your marriage. See, I told you it's all him. I told you it's her fault. See, look what she just did. See, what am I supposed to, look at her. Look at what she did. Oh, see, I knew he'd be late. He's always late. See, look, he told me he'd be here at 7. He promised. Look, 7:05. I'm going to start a countdown on my clock, little timer, so I know how many minutes he is late. Can't believe it. What the promise is nothing to him. And you enjoy moments like that because it makes you feel bigger and better and gives you the upper hand and power in the relationship. It's a real dangerous place to be. That's not what love looks like. Love does not delight in evil, rejoices in the truth. Love protects. See, love does the opposite. When you think about agape love within the context of marriage, you protect your spouse, you protect your relationship. And it's not just like, I'm going to physically protect. So if somebody broke in, I'm going to get them. No, it is that too, by the way. It's not limited to that. It's so much more. It's saying, and throw in there, always trust, always hopes, always perseveres. Like, you're just going to believe the best. You know what? He promised me he'd be here at 7. It's 7:05. I hope he's okay. I bet you, he's probably got a good reason for being late. I know he was going to really try hard to get here, and something probably came up. So 2 different conversations with the same reality being, like, thrown in there. One is, well, he's late. He's always late. I can't believe him. One is, he's late. I knew he was going to try really hard, and I wonder what happened. I believe the best. I hope for the best, and I'm not going to throw him under the bus or destroy a relationship over this. I'm going to protect our relationship, and it's going to persevere because of my love and commitment to him or my commitment to her. And agape love, verse 8, never fails. There are no mistakes. There are no failures in this agape love. Now, listen, we are humans, and we're going to fail, and we're going to make mistakes, and there are going to be tensions and issues, all kinds of stuff that's going to happen that is not ideal. But agape love, if you apply it correctly to your marriage, it never fails. You might fail applying it, but it never does. It is your best option, and there is nothing else waiting in the bullpen. There is no plan B when you start talking about marriage and how it plays out. Anything less than this and anything less than a husband and a wife striving for this together will fall flat on its face. And you might coexist, and you might stay together until the kids graduate, and then, like, you might just live in the same house, but you don't have a winning marriage. And what we want is not just that you make it, but that you have a winning marriage. But there's a question that people often have as we start running through all of this. And the question is, what do I do if I'm doing this? Okay, Doug, I get it. Agape love, I want agape love unconditional. I'm just going to love, be patient, kind, all of it. But, Doug, I'm not the problem. They are. So you want me to be loving, patient, kind, not envious, all that, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you want me to do all that, Doug? They're not doing it. So what am I supposed to do now? Because now I've lost all the power. Now they have the upper hand. Now they have no incentive to change. Now they have no reason to get better because I'm just going to love them no matter what, and they're going to treat me like they treat me. Like, where's the justice in that? It's not fair. Well, there's a phrase that I heard a long time ago. I can't even remember who said it for the first time, but it's been said dozens of times after by really famous pastors and clergy, theologians, whatever. Marriage was designed not to make you happy, but to help make you holy. There's a part of it, like, it's to make you whole and complete. But the other part is, like, your goal, because we think of a marriage in an American terms, your goal is to, like, be as happy as possible. And if your spouse isn't making you happy, I'm going to trade them in and I'm going to get a new one. Because I got to be happy. Happy is the end goal. Happy is the American dream. I'm going to be happy. That is not the goal of the Christian life. It is not to be happy, just be holy. And that's just not applied to the Christian life in general, but to marriage specifically. Your goal is not to necessarily be happy. It's to be holy. It's to do things the right way, even when it's not easy or convenient. And so first I'll say to this, what do I do if I do this, but they're not willing to? You know what the answer is. You still love. Like when Paul said love is patient, love is kind, he runs through the list. You can look in your Bible if you think I'm wrong, but there's no footnote. Love is patient, love is kind. Unless they're a jerk, then thou be a jerketh to them. I just went King James on you, I know, but just, like, there's no footnote there. There's no, like, clause in really fine print where you're like, now wait a minute. I'm not supposed to keep a record of wrongs. Oh, it says I can if they keep record of wrongs. Okay, good, because I was really worried about that. It's not there. When Paul says this is what love is, and that you and I, as Jesus followers who have experienced this love in our life, we're supposed to take this love really to the world we're talking about within the context of marriage, there is no, yeah, but they don't, so you don't. It's just there, and you not got to work at doing it. And their lack of does not give us the right to withhold agape love from them. Because you think about all the situations that are present, like in the room with those watching online, with maybe those listening in the parking lot. It's like, well, what if one spouse is a Christian and the other isn't? What if one spouse is in church and the other one doesn't want to come and they're not even going to hear this type of stuff? I mean, there's so many what-if type of scenarios, and the answer is still the same. You and I are called to do this because this is what Jesus demands of us. But more than that, think about the practical side of this. Because if there's a lot of tension and a lot of issues within the context of your marriage, and you feel like this is outweighed by this drastically, what is your alternative? You going to nag them to death? You're going to be right on top of them like a hawk every time they make a mistake, every time they forget to do something, every time they're late? You're going to get on top of them? Hey, like a coach yelling at a player in the game, or like you yell at your kids? You think that's going to work? You think yelling at your adult spouse for when they mess up is going to make them go, doggone it, you're right. What was I thinking? I see it your way now. Let's get this ship back righted the way it's supposed to be. Now, you're going to be here when you start yelling. Before you know it, you're going to be like 3 layers down into the bedrock and up to the water tower in Woodlawn the wrong way, right? So nagging's not going to work. You can go contractual with it. Say, okay, here's the deal. I promise to be on time every time. It's like, okay, we're going to get a contract, and we're going to get the notary person to put their seal on it, or we're going to sign stuff, and then we're going to have people that are going to come in and check on us, and I'll hold up my end of the bargain if you do too. Well, guess what? When you do that, this just disappears completely. It's just this. The only shot of any type of conversation is this. Bah, you made a mistake. You didn't do it. Oh, you messed up. Look, it says right here, Section 2, Clause 3, that you were going to be on time, or you're going to pay bills like you were supposed, or whatever. You're supposed to be nice to my friends on poker night. Look, you broke it, so therefore, bah, that's all there is. There is no love. Think about when you get fast food or you go to a restaurant, when they give you your meal that you paid for, you don't look at them in the eyes and go, thank you so much for waiting on my table. It warms my heart to know that when my tea was empty, you came and you filled it. You grab them by the hand. I can't even express in words. No, it's like, I'm paying for this meal. It needs to be delivered on time and warm, and I paid for this drink, and it's overpriced. I'm going to just guzzle this thing like crazy. You better just leave the pitcher here because I want to drink. It's like, it's contractual. You don't go out of your way to go, I paid for you to paint these walls, and you painted them, and oh my goodness. No, they painted. If they messed up, that's the only interaction that there is. So contractual, you could just kiss love goodbye. If you say, I will if you, or I won't because you never, now you're just going to get the X over and over. There's no scale anymore. There's no love tipping. It's just X. But here's the challenge for every single marriage, for every single person. There are going to be these types of moments because your spouse is imperfect. And before you start going, did you hear that? You're imperfect. Recognize that you're imperfect as well. And it's not just all on them. And I know your mama, you guys talk, and she can't stand him, and he's always wrong, and she's on your side. And I know you always get together with your golf buddies, you guys are always talking, and she's always that way. And then, you could just, I know you guys feed off of people, and that's why tribes are so important, and getting in a community is so important, and we're, small groups and all that stuff. It's like who you do life with will determine what this looks like in your marriage. You may not even realize it, but if they just add fuel to the fire, it's like boom, 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 boom. But the goal, eventually, is to get like this. I'm not keeping score. I'm not allowing the negative to dictate how our marriage is going to be. I'm just going to love you and you're going to make me mad, and you're going to be annoying, and you're going to drop the ball, and you're going to make mistakes. But so am I. And I'm just going to love you. That's it. So I'm putting the scale away, and you just have the love. All the time. For better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, in the good times and the bad, you've got it. And I will do my best to just love you unconditionally. That's where we're trying to go in our marriages. And there may be times where you're tempted and even actually grab that back again. Maybe they won't notice. We go, okay, see, we're here. You need to do better, right? You still have conversations, and you still can sit down and communicate and talk. But here's what I believe, and I'm naive, I know. But I believe that deep down, your spouse, they don't want this. They want this. And they don't want to disappoint you. And they don't want to make you unhappy. And you don't want to disappoint them, I hope, and make them unhappy. And sometimes the way you guys communicate that with one another, things get lost in translation. But deep down, like when you stood before a pastor, even if you were in a courtroom before a judge and you had either a big wedding or just a small family there, like when you stood before, like there was something there, wasn't there? When you said I do, you're not like I do for like 10 years and then, I don't anymore, and I'll go on to the next one. Like, nobody goes into it thinking that. Like, you were here. Get back to here. And with God's help, and with good counsel, no matter where you're at, you can get back here. Now, here's how I want to end our service today. I want us to reread together as a group 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 and following. And in that reading, it is no longer going to say, love is patient. It's going to say, I will be patient. Like, this is like a moment where you're going to renew your vows unofficially. This is a moment where, like, okay, you know what? I messed some things up. I've got it wrong. And yeah, I can be unbearable, and I'm quick to be angry. And, like, you've got all this stuff. If you start to really think internally, I got some things I need to clean up. But you know what? Here's my commitment to my spouse. I will be patient and kind. Like, make this your battle cry. And when tensions get high and when things start to go south, you cling to the words of 1 Corinthians 13. You beg God, God, help me live this out in this moment because it's not easy, it's not natural. And you'd be amazed in those moments what God will give you the strength to do. And if you're not married yet, or you were married and you're like, this doesn't apply to me, 1 Corinthians 13 still applies to you. And I still want you to read it as kind of your own individual mantra. This is how I'm going to live in all my relationships. So, let's all read this together, okay? Here we go. In my marriage, I will be patient, I will be kind, I will not envy, I will not boast, I will not be proud, I will not dishonor my spouse. I will not be self-seeking. I will not be easily angered. I will keep no record of wrongs. I will not delight in evil, but will rejoice with the truth. I will always protect. I will always trust. I will always hope. And I will always persevere. My love will not fail. Father, I pray a blessing on each and every marriage that's here today, for all those who will be touched by this message. I pray you convict hearts. I pray you challenge us to live out these words. Father, I pray for those marriages that are hanging on by a thread. I pray for those that are rock solid and winning at this moment. I pray for every marriage in between. There are seasons, there are ups and downs, there are highs and lows. What is consistent, Father, what needs to be consistent is our love for one another. So show us what this looks like. Give practical application into our minds and into our hearts. Help us to do our best to love our spouse the way that you love us and the way that we love ourselves. We lift this up. We pray a blessing on it in Jesus' name. Amen.